So good day everyone. My name is Jean Louis V. Guerrero and I'm going to report The Children of the City written by Amadis Maria Guerrero. So before we proceed to the story, let's have the background of the author first. Amadis Maria Guerrero was born in Ermita on April 15, 1941. He studied in Ateneo de Manila and completed his bachelor's degree in the University of Santo Tomas. He is a Filipino author of Philippine literature. His story entitled Children of the City won the Palanca Awards on 1971. Amadis Maria Guerrero wrote for Graphic Magazine. He published his work in some magazines, and in later life, he was writing for the Philippine Daily Inquirer. The setting of the story was happened in the late 1980s. Everything occurred in the dark, busy streets of Manila. The characters of the story entitled Children of the City was first Victor. The main character was a boy from Intramuros. Victor's dad, also a character, he was a loving father to Victor in which he promises his child a better future. Tio Pedring, his uncle, adopts him and lets him work as a newspaper boy after his mother abandons him. Nasho, a newspaper boy, was the only friend that Victor had. Victor's mother cared for Victor's father. She loved him, but she never really cared about Victor. She grieved at her husband's death, but she then ignores Victor, becomes a prostitute, and leaves Victor to his uncle. Now, let's proceed to the summary of the story. Children of the City is about Victor, who was a simple and normal boy. He had a loving father who promised him a bright future despite of having a careless mother. His father cared for him too much, but unfortunately, one night, while walking around the dark streets of Manila, his father was shot in the heart, which caused Victor too much pain. After his father's death, Victor's mother rejects the idea of having to take care of Victor. She doesn't come home leaving Victor all alone and come back introducing Victor to his new father. Victor didn't like the idea of having a new father because no one could ever replace his one and only dad. One day, Victor woke up alone in their home. His uncle then adopts him and forces him to work as a newspaper boy. His uncle doesn't treat him properly, not unless Victor brings him some money from selling newspapers. During his job, he meets Nasho. Nasho was also a newspaper boy who teaches him different techniques on selling newspapers. Victor grew fond of Nasho despite of having vices, but one day, Nasho was run over by a car. The other newspaper boys convinced and pressured Victor to saying curse words and smoking with them. Whenever Victor declined, he would get beaten up. After some more convincing, Victor eventually gave up and gave in to them. The point of view of the story, Amadis Maria Guerrero used third-person point of view. The conflict of the story was man versus man and man versus society. First, the conflict was man versus man because Victor had a conflict with different characters. Man versus society because Victor realized how cruel the world is and that no one can really escape the harshness of reality. Style, theme, and the mood of the story. The writing style of the story was narrative. And the theme social injustice, child labor, which is also indicated in the story that Victor was worked as a young child. The mood of the story is sadness and hopelessness because as you can see, the story is very sad and hopelessness of the characters. Literary devices used in the story. First is the diction, formal diction. As a literary device, diction refers to the choice of words and style of expression that an author makes and uses in a work of literature. In the story, the author uses more elevated words like haughtiness, inexorably, anguish, and interloper, making it clear that his piece of literature was written for those with a higher education. So, I have different definitions and how the author used the words in the story. First is the haughtiness, the appearance or quality of being arrogantly superior and disdainful. The word haughtiness was used to describe how the management's behavior towards the worker. Inexorably, in a way that is impossible to stop or prevent. This word was used to describe the event that happens during the rallies which resulted to accident or casualties of the worker. Anguish, severe mental or physical pain or suffering. This word was used to describe the pain that they felt after receiving the news about her husband's death. Interloper, a person who becomes involved in a place or situation where they are not wanted or are considered not to belong. This word used to describe the act of Victor towards his stepfather or new tatang. The second literary device that used in the story is allegory. An allegory is a figure of speech where abstract ideas are described using characters, events, or other elements. This story represents the life during the Marcos regime. In the Philippines, it was a truly scary time when people had no freedom, especially free speech. The story portrayed how hard life was and how far you had to go just to be able to live through the night. No one except the higher-ups was safe. Children, women, and men alike had to face daily problems, and it felt like living was a burden to them because of how oppressive the government was during that time. The third literary device used in the story is the symbolism. This literary device is the use of situation or elements to represent a larger message, idea, or concept. Victor symbolized the normal citizen during the Marcos regime. During those times, it was a case of survival of the fittest, and living was not an easy task, especially if you are included in the minority. So before I ended my presentation, because I think this is the last part of my presentation, I want to give my ideas about the story. So the story for me is very sad because it portrays a life of a young child which her parents abandoned her mother rather, because her father was died. We also know that there are some evidences from the internet that will prove how cruel the life of Filipino in Manila during the Marcos regime. So we can imagine, if we were going to read or the summary of the story, we can imagine how cruel and how difficult the life that Victor experienced during that time. But as I said in my report earlier, the the situation of the characters was also considered as survival of the fittest, which also occurred during the Marcos regime, which their life is very difficult, and they may experience that if they won't work, they don't have food. And also there are some, but I cannot also consider that the life of every Filipino during that time is poor, because there are also that higher ups that exist during that time, which the life of every Filipino during that time is also unfair. But I cannot conclude that all of them experience the same that Victor experienced. So I believe this is the end of my report. Thank you.